Wales lost to France by 43 points last year, only 42 this year. Clear signs of progress, Wales. By 2068, they should be beating them.
And then getting an extra point win on top of that.
On top of that each year. Just
each year for the rest of time.
You want to keep building, aren't you?
Forever.
Steady progress.
So by the year like 6,000, I reckon we'll be winning this game by a good like 3,000 or 4,000 points.
Those cyborg Dupont will still be playing.
Yes, yes. Although like Jack Morgan's great grandkid will be tearing it up.
So hugely significant game in kind of French rugby history, right? For the first time ever, they've now won more games against Wales than they have lost. It took them 20 odd years to beat Wales, obviously kind of when they first added to the Six Nations, the Four Nations as it was then.
Glory days.
Wales were the best team in the world. Take me back. Take me back to that time immediately before World War I. And since then, France have continued to build until we get to this situation now, where this was the most points they've ever scored against Wales. It was, I think, their third biggest win of all time, their biggest ever in Cardiff. This was a huge day for French rugby, and yet it felt fairly routine.
Yeah. So we'll get into the French attack very quickly, but it's just like, this felt like a bit of a procession in that so often France would move forward, and your immediate response is just like, how are they meant to stop these guys?
Yeah.
Like literally what are you meant to do?
So if we look at the opening try, right, because France also got straight into their attack, Amu Gaiton popping up and scoring a brilliant try right from the start. This comes from France winning back a Welsh kick. And we'll get into the Welsh kicking game as we go on, but they work immediately from regathering that out to whip.
So France ran this shape all day, and they would use either Thomas Ramos or Mathieu Jalibert interchangeably in the first receiver role. And off that, they would set a group of 3 to 4 forwards and a back, you know, and at this point, all of these can change their lines. They can change kind of how deep they're set, how flat they're set. But on this one, they send them in quite flat with the other one of Ramos or Jalibert coming out of the back.
Yeah, they're waiting behind. So in this case, Ramos pops up, works round, and between them, Joe Hawkins and Josh Adams do a brilliant bit of work here, right? Josh Adams spots it immediately, fires right in, makes the tackle, gets them to ground, no offload is available. They shut down this move before it can get to width. However, this still creates a ruck in quite a wide position. And then, right, this is the thing many people spotted, is you have Dewi Lake and Rhys Carre are left defending on the short side. There's a few angles on this of why this happens. Why have Wales left 2 front row forwards on the short side against Antoine Dupont and Tewa Togbe, who are obviously incredibly quick, incredibly skillful, and can exploit that gap?
On kick chase, by design, what Wales do, a lot of teams do this, is they leave Ellis Mee near to the scrum half. So he can just go in a straight line, get right after that kick. And, you know, this is actually a pretty good kick by Thomas Williams. You know, he sent a lot of poor ones, which we'll get into. This is one of his better ones of the day. Ellis Mee's very close to winning this back. So that leaves a vacant spot on the wing, which is where they leave Eddie James.
Yeah.
So Eddie James is covering for Ellis Mee here. You know, they're taking shifts for each other. And obviously, you would expect maybe a centre, maybe a scrum half or a fly half to cover the space on the wing when the wing and the centre aren't available. However, Thomas Williams is in a bit of a sweeper role here. He's trying to cover the ground as France move the ball, and Dan Edwards is in the backfield.
We then look at the previous phase, right? Dewi Lake carried on a central position for the box kick, and as they get back up to the feet, the last two, the first clean out option, Rhys Carre, gets up and starts to jog back, as does Dewi Lake. Now, Lake just looks up and goes, where's the space? Where do they need me? Okay, I'm heading over there. Rhys Carre starts immediately working over to the open side to get into that wide gap. Now, Wales used Rhys Carre, especially off kick return quite a lot, as an edge forward. They wanted him carrying in those wide channels. They wanted him getting involved there so they can line him as well as one of the biggest ball carriers, one of the biggest men in the Welsh team. Lining him up against the likes of, you know, you've got Dupont centre in the 12 channel. You've got BLBRA is not the biggest man in the world on the wing. You want to get him carrying in there. It's an interesting strategy. Not many teams use, you know, the Red Roses do it with Sarah Byrne and Maud Muir, but not many teams use their props in the wide channels in that edge forward role. Wales looking to do that carry quite a few times over the course of this game. They're clearly looking for that on the chance that he regathers the ball, right? However, if he doesn't regather the ball, if Mead loses it in the air, it means you've just got your prop in the wide channel. So it's an incredibly risky strategy to have him instantly setting over there and heading over there before he knows the outcome of the aerial contest.
It's high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
And it does slightly backfire in here.
So one phase of play, as we mentioned, they work out there, Adam makes the great read, and those two front rowers just go, okay, we'll work out to the outside, we'll cover this space. France aren't going to go this way, they're setting up this way. They're just the closest guys, right? So they set in there.
And they've worked hard.
They've worked hard.
Dewi Lake was in that catch-up role that, you know, we see South Africa use Sia Khaleesi for instance, you know.
Yeah.
Like, they have both worked hard to get here. However, the knock-on effect of France playing this wide and getting those two Welsh outside backs on the floor is the 2v2 that they find themselves in. Now, Dewi Lake has got his eyes up, he's looking at Asogbe, he's got him marked. If Dupont just passes him the ball, he's going to smoke Asogbe, and that's a good thing, right? However, what Dupont does here is incredibly smart. A lot of scrum halves, do this when you've got a prop around the fringe, and that in itself is fine, that's where you want them, if anything, is the closest space to the ruck, so they're covering the least space. However, what Dupont does, a lot of scrum halves do this kind of when they're crabbing to the open side, so they can just pick the ball up, maybe take 1 or 2 steps. It's something that Mike Phillips was very good at back in the day. Conor Murray, very good at this as well. Just to attract the eyes of kind of the third defender out, the second defender out, right? And then they can sling the ball to the number 10, who has a bit more space. It takes a bit of pressure off them. Dupont instead does this on the blind side here, and knows that if he can get on the outside of Carey, which he knows he can because he's Antoine Dupont against, a big prop, he can put that ball into one hand because Dewi Lake is already going to focus on him. That's always going to happen, And that is the last man. You've taken out both defenders in this game. And Asogbe reads it very, very nicely.
Right before he picks the ball up, Dupont is looking up, and he is looking at this gap between Beard and Cracknell. And he knows there's a big gap there, right? But if I start going that way, that gap's going to close. Beard and Cracknell are both going to come into me, and the Welsh defence will tighten it around him. However, if he goes the other way, Beard will work across, Cracknell will stay off in case he changes his mind and flips back, which Dupont does all the time. Yeah. You've got to stay alert to options on both sides. So, Cracknell stays put, Beard works across to try and do that, and instead, bam, opens up a huge hole for Asogbe to make one step and go through, working around Beard and making the break.
And it's 3 of Wales' kind of slowest players get clogged into the same space here. And so, when Dupont gets that offload in, Asogbe, 1v1 versus Adam Beard, he's always going to win that. The support line by Charles Olivon is absolutely outstanding here as well. He's so good at this. And France have so many men flood through, If there's 50 more metres on the pitch here, Gaetan can probably offload this to Jalibert.
None of these are running the same line. They all adjust onto the previous runner. They all make sure they're running realistic lines that both the current ball carrier, but also the next ball carrier along, if it does go to whoever, can then run onto. Like, France's support work is unbelievable and so good throughout the entire game. You look at Asogbe's try, right? And how that comes from him, spotting it way back in the backfield. And the moment France regather the ball, the moment Ramos has that, Asogbe starts sprinting in because he knows if this ball gets to BLBRA, I need to be in support. It's so good. Like, this is one of France's best attributes. And people don't talk about it. People talk about
trust, isn't it?
Yeah, but everyone is doing it. Like, he's coming across in the backfield. He's taking a huge risk there, right? If that offload doesn't go to hand and it ends up, on the Welsh side or something, or even if it got lost and you just didn't see it properly, they're losing that. They're losing that ball. They've got no one in the backfield.
Quick cross field. Yeah. And they're unmarked on that wing.
As it is, though, France are always alert. They're always switched on. They're always taking that risk of flooding forward and knowing these intelligent lines to run.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of helped by the fact that, obviously, their pack were dominant, always moving forward. But it's also just how mobile that pack is as well. Because we talked about that shape they run in the lead-up to that first try. But this shape is incredibly adaptable, and they clearly really went after Eddie James in the outside centre channel as the least experienced player in that Welsh backline. Eddie James actually did broadly a pretty decent job of this. I think there's a few times they got on the outside of him, but particularly as the game went on, kind of beyond the 20-odd minute mark. Eddie James adapted to this and kind of realised what was going on and clocked onto that, which is very, very good. But here, for instance, right, Jalibert sits back, he is incredibly deep here, and he just invites all of these forwards to run different lines onto the ball. And Dorian Aldegheri, who is one of the least kind of nominated carriers in this French pack, motors onto this ball. And everybody knows what's happening. He punches a hole in the middle of this defence. It's really, really nice, right? Then a minute later, they run pretty much the exact inverse. They have Tomo Ramos comes up. He is mega flat. He's practically on the Welsh line at this point. And instead, the French forwards adjust to that by just holding their feet. And so I think Julien Marchand here takes the ball, and he's got enough time that he can just move the ball. Because that is the way that France like to play. They like to play with a little bit more room when they're not definitely carrying, They like to be able to have the option to throw as many passes as they physically can. And there are so many times in this game that they run shapes like this, where they can use Ramos and Jalibert off each other and just get those lifted passes from their forwards. And Jalibert is used as an extra fullback as much as Ramos is used as an extra fly half. The most notable example is the try scored by debutant Fabien Barbouri, where, again, they run this same move. They go off Ramos on this occasion from left to right. And Oscar Jegu here holds his feet brilliantly. You know, he looks like he is really convincing that he wants to carry this ball and motor into the Welsh defence. And then, as the pass actually comes in, he stops. He pauses his feet because Jalabert gives him the call on the outside, lift the ball to me on my outside. And it's absolutely brilliantly timed. Jaegu just catches the ball and passes it. It's dead simple, but because, you know, the Welsh defence make a bit of a misread on here, like Hawkins and James aren't quite in sync.
The problem is the decision either of them makes is that both of them make different decisions.
Correct.
Like, you've got Hawkins looking at one thing, you've got James looking at another, and if they both just either fly up or both stand off, you can probably cover this, and maybe you lose some ground, but you're still covering it. Instead, one goes for one goes for the other.
What Jaegu essentially does is he penetrates that gap without actually wanting to run into it.
Yeah.
Because he knows that James has no choice but to close that up at that point. And so they can, you know, make him have to turn. And it's a very, very difficult skill to do. So he lifts that ball to Jalabert on the outside, who has the gas to break that line.
Sage that he can't get on the outside when he's slow to turn. Then the inside pass comes from Jalabert. Really good support there from Bradbury, like hits the line really perfectly. We hyped him up a lot in our preview on Squidge 2, and he delivered. Yeah. He was just, he's so good in contact. His feet are so good. He's so dynamic. He danced around the tackle really well. Likewise, I'd look at his almost namesake, Louis Bielbiare's try, which again, a lot of people looked at this and the Atasogbe try, the other Atasogbe try, and went, why are Wales so narrow? Why isn't Reece Zammit out on the touchline? This try, the Bielbiare try, is really simple from a French point of view, yet from a Welsh point of view, it's also pretty simple. In terms of if you are Steve Tandy, or you are Dan Lydia, or you are the defence coach that Wales haven't yet hired because WE is a mess and a shambles, and yet still seem to claim they have the belief of the fans and there's no bloody animosity towards them, or apathy setting in, despite this being Wales' lowest ever turnout in Cardiff for the Six Nations game. But that's a whole
about
other point.
As many French as there were Welsh in Cardiff, apparently.
Yeah. So we have here, right, off this maul, France smash it up, right? Josh Adams is committed to this tackle, whereas I've had to leave him on the short side as a bigger guy so you don't have Dan Edwards tackling on his own. England played the same thing last week, right? He tackles. Dan Edwards is forced to come in as the first defender because the Welsh pack haven't worked out of here in time. Now, there's a really lovely bit of work from Jalonche here, who just drives and angles his hips inwards to pin the Welsh players towards the touchline. However, you still want to get one or two of them bouncing out way earlier than this to get into position. One or two of them works around here. You can bounce Dan Edwards out, you can bounce the two centres out, you can move Ellis Mee out a bit further than the pitch. Lucy Zammit then can cover out wide and potentially get to this kick and at least put pressure on Bielbiare even if he's winning the race to get the ball first. If you are Lucy Zammit in this situation, right, you look at how narrow everyone else is. Dan Edwards has to be here and Eddie James has to be next to him because they are about to try and tackle French forwards who are coming at them, flying up. They don't even know which ones. They're going to come into the right line late and hit them.
Marshall scored off a maul. Yeah. Like, it's a powerful French pack.
Yeah.
If you don't come inwards and make them narrow, they're going to pick and go. You want to make it harder. You want to force them to make an extra pass, or even better, a kick.
So these guys have to stand in narrow, right? That means that Ellis Mee, the furthest out he can realistically get is about this position here. And so on that, Reece Zammit chooses to stand in here because that means if France go through the hands, he can shoot him and put some pressure on. The lowest percentage play that Jalabert can go for here is the cross kick. Because even a player of his ability is more likely to kick it dead, kick it over the touchline, miss-hit it, and send it to Zammit himself, than he is to mess up a simple pass.
Also, the ball's in the air longer, crucially. So Reece Zammit could have covered that.
He's got more chance of getting across. Like, even if he hits it perfectly on the spot, but he's got too much hang time, like, you want to chance your arm on making the 10 make the most difficult decision. So Zammit does the best he can here, because Welsh forwards don't fold around quickly enough.
Yeah.
And there's any other reasons you can point to that as being the case. Is it a setup thing? Is it a problem? Is it laziness? I couldn't say. A little bit of his Jalonche, but it just opens up the space. Because Edwards is set in too narrow, it means everyone else has to move in narrower.
Because of the French pack dominating, you know? It is a winger's try that is just like purely off the grit of the French forwards, you know? And you could say similarly for the try that Atasogbe scored in the second half, the other try that Atasogbe scored in the second half, where the French maul is so powerful. And actually, Nicky Smith and Adam Beard do a pretty decent job of getting through the middle here. And yet, because the French pack has gone so far on the front foot, Dupont can play as two players at once here. Now, the other reason why he can do this is because he's Antoine Dupont, but he plays as a hooker and a scrum half at the same time here. He rips the ball out the back and sure, it bobbles along the floor, but the French pack is so far on the front foot that just doesn't matter. Wales can't get up and get in the face of Bradbury as he flips it out the back for Jalabert, who executes the exact same kick and Atasogbe grounds it.
And again, they go two passes back to Jalabert, which means that once that extra pass comes back, right, if you're Reece Zammit, you've got to come and put pressure on. Like, you can't stand off here because it's too easy. You disconnect naturally if you stand to that width. And Jalabert said throws the pass, he walks right in. It looks even more simple. Again, you want to be forcing France to take the most difficult decision to score. And the thing is, this French team are so skillful that they can take that most difficult decision and still score almost every single time.
Absolutely.
And Wales would making individual good decisions, but there's a broken thing in the system. And some of that is them just not like stopping them on the gain line. They're just really struggling with that, and it will be better when they play teams like Scotland, Ireland, and Italy, right, who don't have the sheer number of ball carriers that France do. But another bit of it is just France found a way to get around it really easily, especially if you get a couple of front line carries.
You talk about the gain line and carriers and so on. So I'm just going to set you a quick task, right? So Wales obviously tweaked their starting pack this week to put a bit more size in that, which I think is a good thing. And, you know, even in hindsight, I'm happy that that was kind of the correct decision, you know. If you were to separate those 8 starting Welsh forwards into the ones who are like proper carriers and the ones who aren't, let's go 4 of each, right? 4 primary carriers and 4 non-primary carriers. How would you separate them?
Well, this is the thing, right? Wales don't have many carriers, but they are. Dewi Lake, great carrier. Rhys Carry came in because he's a carrier, fitting to his name.
Exceptional carrier.
Yeah. Ollie Cracknell brought in to carry more ball, and Aaron Wainwright, obviously all-round but brilliant carrier.
Yeah.
Like, the rest of that Welsh pack are not set up to carry. Like, Alex Mann, not great carrier. The 2 second rows are both very similar players, neither of them particularly dynamic ball carriers, and Tom Francis is there to scrummage in that alone.
Yeah. So the thing that frustrates me about watching this Welsh team is the lack of gain line ball. Not many teams in World Rugby have 8 outright carriers. Like, if anything, it's a bad idea to have 8 outright carriers because it means you're probably compromising something on the set piece. You know, you might not be having a line-out jumper who's as good if you're, you know, compromising that for a carrier. Now, this is clearly a big part of the Matt Sherratt system that he's used with Cardiff and is now using with Wales, is that he wants to kind of divvy up the carriers and the non-carriers and keep the carriers together.
So the way most teams set up is you will have a pod of 3, 4, how many forwards, and you will have in there a primary carrier, a decent enough carrier, and then you have someone that's there to clean out. So Wales, hypothetically, will be looking at Dewi Lake as the primary carrier. You've then got Alex Mann as someone that can carry but isn't like perhaps the best carrier in the world, and then an Adam Beard, right, time and situation, or a David.
Just to lock that ruck down.
Yeah, is there to clean out the ruck and just lock it in. What Wales do instead is they tend to look to split those up into groups. So they want one pod, which is primarily their best carriers in one group. That is guaranteed to get you go forward and fast ball. So whichever one of them if you hit, if they tip it on at all, they will get over the gain line and they'll get going forward. That means the other pod isn't realistic. So if you look at this example here, right, the idea is clearly Wales want to hit this first pod, which contains Alex Mann, David Jenkins and Tom Francis, who are none of them great carriers. They're probably 3 of Wales' weakest carriers. You know, Adam Beard not present, but, you know, where the best carriers are all in this middle pod. Dewi Lake, Rhys Carry, like, they're all lingering out there. So what they want to do is just hit this first pod, smash over the gain line, or at least get up to the gain line, but play quick ball because they've got good players who can clean out the ball cleanly, and then they hit the next pod who get over the gain line, and then the backs all work around at once, hit the width, having taken the French pack out of the game, only targeting these backs on the extreme. This is the thing we saw Matt Sherratt's Cardiff team run over and over again, of hitting up that middle pod, which is like overpowered, so that you can create a short side that you can then play off, right, and send the backs round, they all wrap around at once. This doesn't work at international level, because what happens is exactly what happens here. You have France fly up on the first pod, they smash Alex Mann so far behind the gain line, it then means they have so much momentum, then the ball comes on the next pod, they're also caught way behind the gain line, and Francois gets well over the ball and disrupts it massively to slow the ball down because his team are going forwards.
Yeah, and then when Thomas Williams ships it on to Dewi Lake, at this point, he's already looking up and going, oh shit, France are in my face.
Yeah.
He tips it on nicely to Rhys Carry, who actually makes a pretty decent carry out of this, because it's what he does, you know. But the difficulty is, let's call it the non-carrying pod, you know, the Alex Mann, Dav Jenkins, you know, none of these are in the team to do that. They're all in the teams. They can do it, obviously, but that's not their primary role, right? They are set as any other pod does, as what everybody else in World Rugby does. And there's a part of you that wonders, are they better off basically just going like full naughty style, just crash it up, like accept that you might get nailed, but at least you're on the gain line, you know? Because at this point, they are taking the ball and taking the contact on France's terms, on Francois Crowe's terms. Because Francois Crowe has made 2 efforts to blast through that breakdown there. And on another day, he's potentially turning that over. Because this pod is so incredibly deep, which is how every team plays. But I think if you're separating your best carries and concentrating them all into one group, do you have to change and slightly compromise how the other group actually take the ball? You know, do they have to just go a bit flatter and accept that they're kind of essentially just going to crumple on the advantage line and just lock the ball down and try and just get a quick phase rather than a dominant phase.
So this comes back to the large part of the problem with Wales, right? Which is that the attack outside the 22 isn't really working. In the 22 it is.
Yes.
Like, Wales had very few 22 entries, but they converted like half of them almost. I think they've had 5 and they converted 2, which is a decent enough return rate.
Against a better team as well.
Yeah, they're very solid in the opposition 22 because they tend to adapt more and they play with more variety than they do when they're across the rest of the pitch, right? And critically also played much flatter. But, if we look at the try, so Dewi Lake taps this here, and the players alongside him, Alex Mann and the 2 second rows, who's there to clean out, because they want nothing but quick ball, so they get players who are really good at locking over it to clean out the ruck and generate quick ball, at which point they send it out and they have a number of their best carriers running different lines. So you've got Cracknell standing in behind, you've got Carey running one line, and Aaron Wainwright on the complete opposite line, working against the grain. And it causes the French defenders to set off because, okay, we've got the carriers coming in different directions. And also, to generate quick ball because they use their players properly. And in the 22, they're so much better than around the rest of the pitch, where they're playing the system that worked at club level to an extent, but never worked against teams with big packs who could knock them behind the gain line because they wouldn't go forward because they catched out that first pod first. And I don't think it's going to work against anyone other than there might be the odd team, like it worked in bits against Japan. It'll work in bits against teams with less physicality that aren't aggressive in their defence. So Scotland, likewise, their defence is not particularly line speedy, so they may get some return against Scotland. But after that, I'm questioning Italy's defence, very capable of being very aggressive. Ireland's defence, very aggressive. What are they going to do with this? This attack fundamentally only works if the opposition line speed is not South Africa style really flying up.
It's an interesting one because you mentioned on that try, right? It doesn't matter whether or not Aaron Wainwright runs a good line here. If you're 5 metres out from your own try line or less than that, and Aaron Wainwright is running at you, you're going to stick your eyes up and want to tackle him because you want to stop him. So when that ball goes in behind to Rhys Carey, obviously Wainwright's in the way of people. He's stopping that fold getting round, so Carrier gets a bit of a 1v1 for that try line. Now, contrast that, later on in the game, they have this attacking passage where they attack a little bit like that from about 60 metres out from the try line. And weirdly, it kind of works. That they get over the gain line a fair bit. They get over the gain line 3 times in a row with Rhys Carey, with Dewi Lake, with Alan Wainwright, all of these guys carrying, or Cracknell, all carrying the ball, who are all good at that. And then after this, and this is the thing that really frustrates me. Dan Edwards doesn't capitalise on this. He makes a kick which I think you can call premature. It's a good kick.
It's a very good kick.
It's contestable, but the idea of kicking on the front foot is to tie that opposition winger in or to bring him into the front line so you can then kick him behind where there's space. And I think Dan Edwards is maybe a phase away from this being a really good decision. Instead, I think he slightly premeditates it, and that, of course, leads to the aforementioned Atisogbe try where Ramos slingshots the ball over the top to BLBRA.
Again, you've got to look at who's set up in your chase. They've got no forwards on this side. It's only really, one winger chasing on their own and then a couple of players getting there eventually. You've got to make sure you've got the chase set up properly. And we come back to the Welsh kicking game. And this is a weird one. So Wales hung 5 bombs off Dan Edwards over the course of the game. They won 3 of them back, and all 5 of them, I think, were good kicks. One of them they very almost win back, and then that one, obviously, they have a real contest in the air, and then things go very pear-shaped from there.
There's one that he slightly overhits, but Dav Jenkins does a good job to nearly sweep this up, and on another day you might get that.
But the other 3, they then win back. So, they're kicking off 10, broadly very good, broadly set up well, broadly Dan Edwards absolutely nailed it, and every kick he sent up was a very good kick. The problem was often the decision to kick, as you said, but when your attack fundamentally doesn't work, because it's set up to go through one pod first, that is starting 10 metres behind the gain line, is not very good carriers, and just giving you a chance to get up and knock them behind the gain line, you're going to have to kick more ball. And Thomas Williams, exceptional player, one of the best players Wales have available to them. He kicked very badly at the weekend.
He did, unfortunately. And, we have been very much on record of saying, Thomas Williams is Wales' best and most important player. But I think there's something that really teaches you about this, and in a way, you don't need this tape to learn this. But France obviously have the best escort game in the Six Nations, right?
England also very good.
England also very good. But, if there is, a ball that's slapped back, a ball that goes loose off a box kick, they are much better at sweeping it up than Wales are. They work really hard. If you look at a box kick that is done by either France or their opponents, right, count how many of them get caught by a French forward, right? It will be much higher than their opposition, pretty much always. And so, when you combine that with so that being the fact that France are more likely to win the ball back, with the fact of how France play off counter-attack, i.e. they like to sling the ball wide, find a lot of space, just so they can chance their arm on what Bielbiere, what Ramos can do, what Atisogbe can do. And also, and this is the crucial one, if you ever so slightly overhit it, France will run rings around you.
Yeah.
And Thomas Williams kept, the majority of times, overhitting his kick by maybe 3 metres.
Yeah.
And that is all this French back three needs. And it's almost death by 1,000 cuts, you know? That if you very slightly overhit it 10 times, you're allowing them to just get on the outside and just eat you up.
George Ford, the only player of the Six Nations to kick the ball more times than Thomas Williams. I think there were 3 kicks Thomas Williams put on the money the weekend. Wales only won 1 of them back. Because even though Ellis got quite a number of slapbacks, needed quite a number of very good chasers, Wales' escort game, them getting those players around there, is not particularly good. If you look at this screenshot, again, there are no Welsh players on the French side. They all stop. You look at Dav Jenkins here, right? He stops well before working around. He's going with enough pace, he's got enough time to get round and get on the French side. And in case, it's won back by France in the air, he can get in there and win that race to the space and win the ball back. He doesn't do that. Wales aren't being coached to do that. Literally the only time in the game where someone did that was Ollie Cracknell here, because Thomas Williams hits the ball way shorter than he expected and he accidentally works around and he's in a good position to regather the ball. That's the only time Wales did it over the entire game, over either game so far.
It's an interesting one because obviously in rugby you want to stay aligned with your players, don't you? And so both Dav Jenkins and Alex Mann remain in this line, remain connected here. However, as you say, when that ball goes back, France have a bit of a free run on this. However, on the flip side of it, look at Francois Cross.
Yeah.
He is stood in a position where if Wales gets something to this, he is more than likely going to either sweep this up or he is going to get straight into the ribcage of whoever catches it for Wales. Yeah. So France immediately, there is almost no downside to this kick for them because their forwards have worked so hard around the ball.
It leaves Wales in a really interesting place, right? Because the team that's being named on paper and the team that's going out on, I was going to say tarmac, on grass, are not aligned. So Wales are consistently picking a team to play the match share attack. And yet, 1, that isn't quite working. And 2, that is not the best way they can be playing because they're being opened up. They're putting in the likes of, you look at last week, Ben Thomas and Eddie James being walked all over by England. And so many times we're seeing these forwards getting caught behind the gain line or the opposite, letting players get over the top of them, from football-wise. A lot of it is set up in terms of their kicking game, in terms of the way they're set up to defend, to just be a niggly team who are really hard to beat. And then they're not picking the 15 that is best set up to do that. There is a world in which Wales can nail down a few of these positions, pick some bigger lads, bring in the likes of Jim Botham, the likes of, potentially starting Ryan Elias and bringing Dewi Lake off the bench. I thought Elias had a very good kind of return to that shirt.
Sure.
Bringing in the likes of Owen Watkins, who's an experienced defender.
Rhys Davies.
Rhys Davies in the second row, or potentially just on the bench, as just big lads who can physically get in amongst it and keep Wales in these games. And the other elephant in the room, right, and this is something I would have thought unthinkable a couple of weeks ago, but do you just need to start Kieran Hardy? Because if you break rugby down to 100 attributes, right, Thomas Williams is a better player than Kieran Hardy on 99 of them. But the one area Kieran Hardy's better than him in is box kicking. Kieran Hardy's a much better box kicker. He gets more height on this ball, more time in the air, and he's more accurate with it. It's way rarer that he overhits a ball in the way Thomas Williams did consistently at the weekend. Do you just need to go, okay, we're going to lean into being hard to beat. We'll put Dan Ed with his halfback partner at club level, put in the best box kicker, keep in the best chasing back three we have available to us, put in, Owen Watkins, a more defensively sound 13, put in Jim Botham in the back row, put in Rhys Davies, put in Ryan Elias, allow Dewi Lake to come on and be competitive and have someone coming off the bench who can be very aggressive. Do you just need to lean into that identity? Is the way I'd go is just go, okay, we're going to be hard to beat against these last 3 teams and then see if we can earn the right to be an attacking team. Because Wales are not there yet. It's either that or they go too far in the opposite direction, right? And you drop all of these players, you put in Jared Evans at 10, you put in, Blair Murray back in at fullback, and you just go all out for attack.
I see what you're saying completely. And I think the thing that you do lose is Thomas Williams in the 22 because he is a big part of why Wales are so dangerous. And as I said, there are many, many reasons why Thomas Williams is kind of the better pick, I suppose. The other, I guess, option is if you want to look at unpredictability in attack, Jared Evans coming in at 10 is a possibility because, and a large part of this is thanks to Dan Edwards and the way that he's attacking.
Exactly. But France getting used to attacking one way or defending one way for 60 minutes.
Yes, but as soon as Jared Evans came on, he varied his option every single time in his first passage of play, which is brilliant. It's what you want as an impact 10. But also maybe that is something that they're going to look at moving forward as a starting, because we're halfway through the campaign now, you know, it might be that Scotland start doing the homework on how Wales attack, but actually what they're looking at is how Dan Edwards attacks. And it might be different with Jared Evans. I think there's a lot of different ways they can play this. Adam Beard at fly half is the other one, the other possibility that they could lean into. But
Yeah, excellent kicking game with that lad. The worst thing about that is the space is there. Like, it's a good decision to kick if he's anyone other than Adam Beard.
yeah, when you say it's a good decision for him to kick, the key word is him. Like, it's not a good decision for him to kick. It's a good decision for a rugby player to kick the ball there.
Like, okay, I have watched Adam Beard play 200 plus times. I watched every game he played for the Ospreys in Wales. That's 200 games exactly between them, plus for the under-20s, plus a couple of times for Montpellier since he's moved there. Literally the only other time I've ever seen him kick a ball was this charity, like, bloody, like, crossbar challenge attempt. This is him trying to hit the crossbar.
This is him age 18, by the way.
Yeah. Like, yeah, he hasn't aged.
Yeah.
He came through looking like a 40-year-old tall man and has remained that way ever since. I genuinely think him kicking that was the most I've ever heard you laugh.
Yeah, honestly, I broke down and absolutely
I've never heard you laugh harder than that.
I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You've got to enjoy it when you're supporting Wales, and like that just felt like Welsh rugby in a nutshell at the moment.
Yeah.
It's fair to
Can
say.
we get to 5 positives for Welsh fans to take away from this game? Number 1 point closer than last year.
Yes. Number 2, I mean, it's on my head at the moment, but the lineup was good.
Line out, yeah.
I don't think they lost any on their own ball.
So, yeah. That's the thing Adam Beard brings, right? Like, everything around the pitch, never mind, he is a brilliant line-up forward. People don't mind that in the tight head prop, right? If they're just a brilliant scrummager.
It's something I will say, because, like, talking of that kick and, like, Adam Beard's general performance, a lot of people are calling, like, Adam Beard hasn't played well for a long time, needs to be dropped, right? And that is a completely fine opinion to have. Like, I completely understand why people have that opinion based on his sheer performance around the park and so on. If you have that opinion, you have to accept that the Welsh lineup will not be good anymore.
Yeah.
That Wales will lose all of their lineup, not all of their lineups, but will lose a higher percentage of their lineup if that happens. And it's just, you know, if you value the line-out less than what Adam Beard could potentially be bringing, or somebody other than Adam Beard could be bringing around the park, then fine. And the issue isn't Adam Beard, it's the fact that Wales hasn't produced a second row who can call line-outs in the same way he can.
I come back to the stat, right? The 2023 and 2024 combined, Wales' line-out percentage with Adam Beard is 92%. Without is 73%.
Yeah.
Like, he's worth 20% of your line-out ball.
And maybe the opinion is, you know, you stick in someone like Rhys Davies, you
Yeah.
accept the line-out isn't going to be good for a bit as he acclimatises to being the primary line-out caller at international
Dav Jenkins
level.
does, yeah.
Or Dav Jenkins, who's been very good for Wales recently. And you accept that maybe that's long-term the option. Fair enough if that's your opinion, you know. But yeah, I just think a bit of context is needed around the whole Adam Beard discussion.
Okay, I'll say scrum goes as well.
Oh, yeah,
well in
sorry,
that point.
yeah.
That goes in. Both the scrum went well in the second half. So there's 2 positives.
Ellis Mee's a good lad, isn't he?
Ellis Mee was very good, as was Dav Jenkins. I thought both of them were excellent.
He works so hard.
He's just everywhere. He just gets absolutely everywhere. He's like one of the hardest working players in the Six Nations. He's unbelievable. I would say the fact that Dave Redding wasn't smiling when they cut to him on the cameras was a good positive for Welsh fans. Like, if this is affecting him now, if he looks miserable, then that's probably actually a good thing if he's like being affected by this.
Thomas Williams did a good tackle
And
on
also,
Dupont.
he did. Also, like, Dave Redding went to a rugby match.
It's true.
Like, literally, Dave Redding, the director of rugby at the WRU, hasn't been to a single non-Wales men's game. Hasn't been to watch the women once, hasn't been to one regional game, hasn't won academy game.
And this is in
watched
his
the
remit, by the
20s.
way. Like-
Yeah, he is in charge of performance rugby in Wales.
For all of those
professional
teams.
Rugby, for all those teams. He hasn't been to see one of them other than the Wales men.
Yeah.
Like, where he's been in the at least he wasn't in the corporate box this week as well. He's actually stood, you know, sat somewhere. Anyway, yeah. And one more positive for Wales. The game finished.
Yes, that was good.
Yeah.
Half time was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah,
We didn't
only-
concede any points in half
Only
time.
3 more of these to go. It's pretty exciting.
I'm looking forward to the Scotland game next week.
Genuinely, the Scotland game might be Wales' best chance to win a Six Nations game this World Cup cycle.
We will preview that later in the week on the second channel. More Squidge Rugby, and we will debate whether or not Adam Beard should indeed move into the backs.